Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 1 in our study of the book of Exodus. Exodus 1:1. Now these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with his household, and then we have a listing of the 12 tribes of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were 70 in number, but Joseph was already in Egypt, so Joseph's not included in that. Now notice the summary statement that there were 70 in number, and we're supposed to hear that, and several things are going to come to mind. First of all, that's the same number that we had back in Genesis chapter 10. If we counted all the nations that were mentioned, there had been 70 nations that had been listed. When we come to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7, we're going to read, "Remember the days of old, consider the years of all generations. Ask your father, and he will inform you, you elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples." Here it is, "according to the number of the sons of Israel, for the Lord's portion is his people." Jacob is the allotment of his inheritance. What's being said is that you look at how many people were in those nations, and then you look at how many people were in Israel, and it was the same number. That number 70 becomes significant because the Israelites are going to correspond with the number of the nations. That is, the Israelites are representative of all the nations. And there's a New Testament application to that. In Luke chapter 10, verse 1, where Jesus appoints certain disciples, not just the 12, but many more, and sends them out to every city where he's going to come, he appoints 70 of them. Why? Because they're going to go, yes, right now to Israel, but eventually to all the nations. And so he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. Well, verse 6, "Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation, but the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased exceedingly, and multiplied, and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them." Now this didn't take place overnight. This took place over hundreds of years as the Israelites are living in Egypt. Now a new king arose. Actually, it was a whole new dynasty. We'd had a number of new kings rise. But a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, or else they will not multiply. And in the event of war, they'll also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land." So there actually had been, we know from history, there had been a group of invaders. We refer to them as the Hyksos. They were from Asia. They were Semitic in origins. They had entered Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, and they had ruled for about 150 years. And finally, especially Lower Egypt, that is Northern Egypt, and then finally they had been expelled by the 18th dynasty of Egypt. So this makes the Egyptians just a bit skittish about any foreigners. And here's these Semitic foreigners, like the Hyksos. Now the Israelites, I don't think, are to be identified as the Hyksos, but they were like the Hyksos, even had some names that were similar to the Hyksos, and the Egyptians did not like that. So verse 11, "So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities," and two of them are mentioned, Pithom and Ramses. Now this Ramses that's mentioned I don't think it's necessarily the same as the Pharaoh Ramses who's going to come later. He's going to come in the 19th dynasty. Although this city might have eventually been named after him. It's a little like we have a city that we call New York City today. But originally that wasn't its name. We call it New York today, and we could even talk about the founding of New York. But it wasn't called New York when it was founded. It was called New Amsterdam. Likewise, maybe this city wasn't originally called by that name, but it came to be called Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and the more they spread out, so that they were in dread of the sons of Israel. And the Egyptians compelled the sons of Israel to labor vigorously, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and bricks, and in all kinds of labor in the field, all their labors which they rigorously imposed upon them, so that the Israelites become virtual slaves in the land of Egypt. Now, this suspicion had come about against the Israelites on the part of the Egyptians, had come about for several reasons. First of all, they were foreigners, and the Egyptians, culturally, they just didn't like foreigners. Secondly, the Egyptians were shepherds, and we're actually told back in Genesis chapter 46, verse 34, that shepherds were considered to be loathsome to the Egyptians. And so they were from a profession that the Egyptians didn't care for. Thirdly, they were living in Goshen, which was really sort of the back door to Egypt. If you wanted to go to Egypt, if you wanted to come into Egypt from anywhere else in the world, from Asia, from Europe, you were going to come down through Canaan and right through Goshen. And so the Israelites sort of, I guess we could say, they guarded the entry into Egypt. And finally, there were religious differences, and that's going to become key in the book of Exodus, because these Israelites, they worshipped one God, and the Egyptians just did not go for that. The Egyptians, up to this point, had never been monotheists. Now, that's going to change in a few generations for the Egyptians, but it had not changed yet. Exodus 1:15, then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other was named Puah, and he said, when you are helping when you are helping the Hebrew woman to give birth, and see them upon the birth stool, we actually have in the ruins at Karnak on the wall painting, you see it pictured here on the right, women giving birth upon a birth stool. And so the instruction is, if they're upon this birth stool, if it is a son, then you're to put him to death, but if it's a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded them, but let the boys live. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing, and let the boys live? And the midwives, they said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife can get to them. It sounds to me like the midwives, yes, they're fearing God, but they're actually lying. Now, they're lying to protect the Israelites, but that brings up an interesting discussion, maybe for another time, on the lies of the midwives. We're not told that their lying was good, but we're told that their heart was good, and so God is going to bless them. So, verse 20, so God was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied, and became very mighty. Because the midwives feared God, he established households for them. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you are to cast into the Nile, and every daughter you are to keep alive. This isn't going to be the last time that we will see an enemy king who comes against the people of God, who makes such a command. When we get to the New Testament, we're going to see in Jesus, here under Moses, the Pharaoh issues a decree to kill all the male children. When we get to Jesus, we're going to see in Matthew chapter 2, where Herod the Great issues a decree to kill all the young children in Bethlehem. In the case of Moses, Moses would grow up to be the deliverer of his people. But in Jesus, we have the one who would grow up to be the deliverer of all mankind. And it is in that we see the true greatness of Jesus, where Jesus reaches out to all mankind, even to those who were guilty of trying to put him to death.